Resolution.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 19, in memoriam, Brigadier General James Burdett Thayer.
The question now rises upon final reading and consideration of SCR 19. Representative Evans.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. 75 years ago, almost to the day, Officer Cadet James B. Thayer was, like the rest of the world, waiting for news. Nobody knew the D-Day invasion in Normandy was going to happen in 24 hours, but everybody could sense that there was a moment waiting to unfold and that the final battle between the Nazis and the Allies were about to happen. On June 6, 1944, Operation Overlord commenced. We know it as D-Day. The Normandy landings began. Today I stand in support of not just SCR 19, but in support of a truly American life and a truly American hero, James B. Thayer. I hope to spend the next few minutes explaining why this is fitting to be talking about this week. On that D-Day invasion, on the day of, 130 to 156,000 troops landed on the beach in 24 hours. About half of them were American. The rest were from Commonwealth countries as well as allies. 8 navies participated in the support, 6,939 vessels, 1,213 warships. By June 11th, D+5, 326,000 troops had poured in, 54,000 vehicles, 104,000 tons of supplies had landed in France. By June 30th, over 850,000 troops, 148,000 vehicles. The scale, shape, and size of Overlord and the European campaign is sometimes forgotten in our world today. In fact, there has been a bill that recently went across the floor trying to make people remember the truths about what was at stake during that war. The stakes were as real as they can be. Had we lost, which was possible throughout the Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's Germany could still be with us today. And for whatever reason, there are people today who apparently refuse to accept the absolute craven brutality of the Nazi regime and its method of genocide as political instrument, which is why such days as today are important. It is within that cauldron, that fight for humanity, that young James B. Thayer led, inspired, and ultimately succeeded. Mr. Thayer was born in Portland, Oregon on March 10, 1922. He was a descendant of Sylvanus Thayer, who is known as the father of West Point, though he never talked much about that. During his junior year, he participated in the Oregon High School press conference and was elected the conference president. He graduated from high school in 1940, earning a journalism scholarship to the University of Oregon. He thought he would be a journalist for the rest of his life. After high school, he enrolled at the University of Oregon, pursuing journalism. In fact, he became the advertising manager. But the attack at Pearl Harbor changed the direction of his life, as it did so many Oregonians and so many Americans. In 1942, Thayer left college at the end of his sophomore year and joined the Army. He entered the service at the Presidio as an infantry private, but in October of 1944, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant. He was trained as a mine platoon leader at Fort Benning, Georgia. I want you to just consider what a mine platoon leader's job was in those days. As a mine platoon commander, Thayer led his unit across France and into Germany. Along the way, he taught soldiers how to clear minefields along the Maginot Line. He was then reassigned as a reconnaissance platoon leader, the folks that go ahead of everybody else to find the bad guys. That unit included 16 men, 2 half-track tanks, and a Jeep. In 1945, his platoon engaged German SS troops who were occupying a small Austrian town. And I include this because sometimes in our sanitized world, we forget how you actually defend freedom. In the battle, his platoon killed 31 German soldiers. When reinforcements from the battalion arrived, 800 Germans surrendered. For his action, Thayer was awarded a Silver Star. On May 4th, 1945, Thayer's platoon was hunting for German ammunition dumps near Wels, Austria. As they followed a remote forest road, the platoon began to find dead, dying, and emaciated people. That day, that forest changed the lives of all who were there. In fact, I want to quote from somebody who was there that day. On May 4th, 1945, the 71st Infantry Division liberated Gunskirchen concentration camp. When troops of the 71st entered the camp, they learned that the SS guards had fled the corpse-littered camp days before. Some 15,000 prisoners were still in the camp. In the months that followed the liberation, some 1,500 former prisoners died as a consequence of their mistreatment by the Nazis. One of Thayer's friends, a captain, actually said, "As we entered the camp, the living skeletons still able to walk crowded around us. And though we wanted to drive farther into the place, the milling, pressing crowd, you just wouldn't let us." It's not an exaggeration to say that almost every inmate was insane with hunger. Just the sight of an American brought cheers, groans, and shrieks. People crowded around to touch an American, to touch the Jeep, to kiss our arms, perhaps just to make sure that it was true. The people who couldn't walk crawled out toward the Jeep. Those who couldn't even crawl propped themselves up on an elbow, and somehow, through all of their pain and suffering, revealed through their eyes the gratitude, the joy that felt at the arrival of the Americans. During the course of the war, Thayer was to go on and earn another Bronze Star for heroism. And after the war, he continued his service in the Army Reserve, serving in a unit based in Vancouver. He eventually retired from the Army as a reserve colonel in 1982. The story of Thayer is not just military, however. He was, in fact, a leader in his community. He served as the president of the Oregon Historical Society, president of the Port of Portland, and president of the Beaverton Chamber of Commerce. He was also chairman of the Tuolumne Community Hospital. Later on in life, he was appointed by the United States Army to be the designee civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army. And while serving in that position, he was inducted into the Infantry Hall of Fame. Mr. Thayer, Brigadier General Thayer, is one of those people that when everybody else wanted to do something, he always found a way to actually do something. He and his wife Patricia raised 5 children. They're not able to be here today. They have been here earlier in the process. But as we think about tomorrow, the 75th anniversary of D-Day, as we think about the privileges and the rights and, quite frankly, the things we get to talk about and debate and fight about here every day, sometimes it is absolutely critical to remember that all of this is only possible because people left college, left the farm, went to the mill, went to the factory, joined the military, joined the Coast Guard, joined whatever they could do to try to make a difference at that moment when humanity was at stake. Sometimes we forget that what was really at stake in World War II wasn't just a geopolitical alliance. It was whether or not it's okay for one nation to decide that the extinction of one culture after another is a political instrument for power. And Mr. Thayer, General Thayer, I believe, represents the very best about our American ideals, and I urge an aye vote on this resolution.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Evans, would you like to close?
Yes, Madam Speaker, just very briefly. Be it resolved by the Legislative Assembly of the State of Oregon that we, the members of the 80th Legislative Assembly, celebrate the life and enduring legacy of Brigadier General James Burdett Thayer, and we recognize and honor his duty, devotion, and service to his nation, state, and community, and be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution shall be presented to the family of Brigadier General Thayer as an expression of our sympathy and condolences, and I'd like to add, and as a measure of our respect. I urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative. Those of the opinion that SCR 19 should be adopted will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system.